Breaking news tonight, our special edition of Nightly News from the storm zone in Florida as Hurricane Ian slams the state. Hurricane Ian making landfall in southwestern Florida as an extremely dangerous Category 4 storm. The fifth strongest ever to hit the U.S. Winds of 150 miles an hour, catastrophic storm surge and flooding, roofs ripped off, homes and streets submerged, cars flooded, appliances washed out of homes, a whole fire station underwater, and the stunning view from space, satellite images as the monster storm made its approach. The life-threatening storm surge, up to 18 feet expected along parts of Florida's southwest coast. More than 1 million customers without power, and that number only expected to grow as we move into the night. The state of emergency, some 2.5 million people under evacuation orders. The governor today telling residents if you haven't gotten out, it's too late, and urging them to shelter in place to ride out the storm. Tonight, the new track as Ian begins its march across the state where it's headed next. Emergencies declared in Georgia and the Carolinas. Our team in place across the storm zone. Our special coverage begins right now.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, reporting tonight from Bradenton, Florida.
Good evening, everyone, from the southwest coast of Florida, where we are still being buffeted by Hurricane Ian just hours after the eye of the storm made its much-dreaded landfall south of us this afternoon. Blasting ashore near Cayo Costa, its fierce wind spinning at nearly 150 miles an hour. A major Category 4 storm now tied for the fifth strongest hurricane in U.S. history and continuing to sow damage as we come on the air. A jaw-dropping storm surge still sweeping ashore right now, though officials say it is peaking. It left waters flooded in Naples, inundating homes and cars. New damage pictures from the storm testifying to its strength. Power outages affecting more than 1 million customers, but its American landfall just the beginning of Ian's strike on Florida. The now slightly weakened storm now marching towards Florida's east coast, where massive rains could spell the next leg of this long-played disaster. Hurricane Ian barreling ashore midday as a catastrophic Category 4 storm near Cayo Costa, Florida. 155-mile-per-hour winds lashing the coast, just 2 miles an hour short of the most devastating Category 5. Tonight, entire neighborhoods are underwater. In Naples, this fire station flooding, firefighters scrambling to secure their trucks and save what they can, while destructive waves washed a refrigerator out of a home, leaving it floating in the street.
Hurricane Ian is and will continue to be a very dangerous and life-threatening storm. And this is going to be for the days ahead.
Ian, a monster storm that strengthened quickly overnight. Over 2.5 million Floridians were given mandatory evacuation orders in the days leading up to landfall. By 7 a.m., Governor Ron DeSantis warning it was now too late to leave.
It's no longer possible to safely evacuate. It's time to hunker down and prepare for this storm. This is a powerful storm that should be treated like you would treat if a tornado was approaching your home.
This eerie video shows the water that usually makes up Tampa Bay sucked out to sea ahead of the storm. A reported tornado ripping the roof off this apartment complex in Delray Beach.
All of a sudden I felt something and then heard like a train coming right through the house.
Another damaging several small planes. By late morning, powerful winds were already hitting the coast in Sarasota. Heavy wind damage is a given in a storm of this size, but the big variable, always the storm surge. How much water ultimately will be forced inland? Who and what may be cut off by it? In Naples, stunning scenes as the storm surge pushed these cars down a flooded street. The city seeing its highest water levels ever. The surge in Fort Myers could reach a dangerous 18 feet. 250 miles of Florida coastline could see a storm surge of 12 feet. So you had anticipated landfall as as early as yesterday.
Yes.
The mayor of Sarasota telling me residents should brace for the worst.
It's going to be historic flooding is what we're anticipating. We're almost guaranteeing that the grid is going to go down in some respects, so we're asking people to plan for not having electricity for some time.
Tonight, many downtowns looking more like ghost towns. Some did not heed the evacuation orders.
It's my home. It's the only thing I have.
Still, officials say most got out while they still could. At a shelter in Sarasota, I met Stephanie Loring and Jim Wright. What is it like to suddenly be confronted with leaving your home and not knowing what you're going to come back to?
Yeah, it's scary. I'm concerned. It's scary, but we buttoned everything up.
They evacuated their mobile home with their service dog, Adam. Was it a tough call?
No, not on my part, because it's an emergency evacuation. Anyone living in a mobile home should evacuate.
Did you leave some neighbors behind who opted to stay?
Oh, there's a lot, yeah.
Sephora Moyse left her home with her parents and younger siblings.
We're worried about falling trees because we have a bunch of trees around our house, so we're scared that one's going to fall.
And tonight, predictions the devastating storm will not move away from Florida rapidly.
It's 24 hours of rainfall, 24 hours of winds pushing the water. That's 24 hours that you'll see some impacts associated with this.
Governor DeSantis saying the state has resources in place to start moving in as soon as it's safe, including 30,000 linemen on hand to restore power, 7,000 National Guard troops from Florida and neighboring states standing ready to help clean up, and 1,600 high-water vehicles for rescues.
This is not just a 48-hour ordeal. This is going to be something that is going to be there for days and weeks and months, and unfortunately, in some circumstances, even years.
And as we keep saying, the biggest concern as we head into the night is that life-threatening storm surge we mentioned, water pushed inland by the powerful winds. Already we've seen the surge break records along parts of this coast, and Governor DeSantis just saying it appears the surge has now peaked. Kerry Sanders is in Punta Gorda. Kerry, what are you seeing?
Well, Lester, we're on the back end now where the back eye wall is coming through. We've had some of the strongest winds here so far. I'm inside a parking garage area, so we're somewhat protected, but the winds are furious, and as the winds are blowing, there are cases at certain points. There are things flying in the wind, like roofing shingles. It's going to be a very long time to get in a battle, to get an assessment of what's happened here, because it's starting to get dark, and when this storm finally passes through and the rain quits around midnight, then we'll wait for the sunlight to really see how bad it is.
This is what storm surge looks like. The bathtub warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico inundating the streets of Naples, pushing some cars out of their spaces, causing waves of water to rise over the roofs.
So there's the wind speed as I'm standing next to a building, which is somewhat protecting me. Okay, so I'll take a knee. Whoops. See if I can take a knee here. There we go.
Meanwhile, here in Punta Gorda, where the winds reached more than 100 miles per hour, the streets are flooded and littered with tree limbs and debris. This parking garage has become a refuge for residents. James Brown with his dog Oliver.
We have 2 feet of water.
And if it's a 16 or 17 foot,
we'd be very happy to be here.
This is a remarkable display of the force of Mother Nature. This is the Charlotte Harbor Marina here. The wind has actually sucked all the water out. I mean, that's just the bottom of the seabed. And over there, that's heading south towards the hurricane. The counterclockwise motion pulling the water from the Peace River and Charlotte Harbor away.
Experts say the warming waters of the Gulf may be attributed to climate change. 40 years ago, the average temperature of the Gulf of Mexico was approximately 3 degrees cooler. That small increase makes a huge difference. That warm water fuels the monster storm in just 24 hours, increasing wind speed by 35 miles per hour, a phenomenon known as rapid intensification. Ian jumped from a Category 3 to a strong 4. Scientists say that will become more common as the Earth's oceans continue to warm. With the second longest coastline in any state, the Florida Peninsula is vulnerable to storm surges like we've seen today, especially on the Gulf Coast, where Ian is slamming the coastline. The shallow seabed here, less than 100 feet deep, makes it easy for a storm with strong winds to push an enormous amount of water into the coast. Rushing water destroys almost everything in its path.
If you think about a wall of water 10 foot high being pushed by 155-mile-an-hour winds, that's like repeated impacts by a large vehicle, say an SUV hitting a structure every 5 seconds. Boom, boom, boom.
The backside of the hurricane is now slamming into Punta Gorda. The damage and risk of storm surge, immense. Kerry Sanders, NBC News, Punta Gorda.
Kerry, a veteran of these kind of hurricanes, and just north of Naples in Lee County, reports coming in of people stranded due to storm surge. But officials saying it's still far too dangerous for first responders to attempt any rescues. When asked about possible fatalities, officials there earlier tonight saying they don't yet have an estimate. We're closely tracking Hurricane Ian's path as it barrels further inland here in Florida. The governors of the Carolinas and Georgia already declaring states of emergency. Meteorologist Bill Cairns is monitoring it all for us. Bill, what are you looking at?
We're watching the storm surge begin to recede in many areas, but it's really Naples up to Fort Myers, including Bonita Springs. That's where it appears the 6 to possibly 12-foot storm surge did occur, and it was catastrophic. So now we're moving on from there. We still have this extreme wind warning in effect for the Fort Myers area, Cape Coral, the Punta Gorda. That means we still can have extreme wind damage taking place with this storm. As it begins to make its push inland, it'll go from a Category 4 to a 3 to a 2, probably down to a Category 1 later on tonight. But we still could see winds, even in Orlando, up to 89 miles per hour. I was there for Hurricane Charlie. It was similar, and we had people without power for a long time. 72 in Augustine, Daytona Beach, the Space Coast area. These are all people that have a chance of getting down trees and power outages as we go throughout the night. Rainfall, this is also a big concern. The I-4 corridor from Tampa to Orlando, especially from Orlando northwards to Sanford, Daytona Beach, Flagler County up to Jacksonville. Someone has a chance of getting up to 2 feet of rain in the next 24 to 36 hours. And then how about this? Because we're taking it a little closer to the Space Coast and off the coast as a tropical storm, then it heads northwards from there, probably maintaining its intensity. We have hurricane watches from Savannah to Charleston to Lester. It is possible on Friday we could have a second hurricane landfall. If not, it'll be a tropical storm into the Carolinas.
It starts by temporarily delaying ovulation, and you can resume your regular birth control right away. I've got this.
Good to have you with us at this early morning hour. I'm Frances Rivera.
And I'm Philip Mena. Thank you for joining us for this very special edition of Early Today. We are tracking Hurricane Ian. Ian did make landfall as a Category 4 major hurricane with sustained winds of more than 155 miles per hour, making it the 5th most powerful storm to ever hit the United States.
And at this moment, the storm is slowly moving through pitch-dark northeast central Florida. More than 2 million power outages are being reported throughout the state. And so far, there are already about 2,000 flight cancellations for today, many of those for Orlando, Tampa, and Jacksonville airports.
Ian has been downgraded to a Category 1 hurricane, but it's still very dangerous. The winds may be slowing, but the hazard now is catastrophic with life-threatening flooding. Our correspondents are fanned out all across Florida right now, ready to give us live updates on Ian's path and destruction.
Stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow.
Your forewarned weather forecast today at 5 on Local 4 News.
Good morning, I'm Philip Mena.
Glad to be with you. I'm Frances Rivera. Welcome to this special edition of Early Today as we bring you the latest on Hurricane Ian. The storm has weakened from a Category 4 to a 1, but it is still packing a powerful punch as it slowly turns north. Nearly 2.5 million power outages are being reported across the Sunshine State, plunging cities into darkness as a historic flooding threat rages on.
In Port Charlotte, which is just north of where Ian made landfall, this hospital says they were hit from above and below. The storm surge flooded the lower level emergency room, and the winds tore apart the 4th floor roof, which is where the intensive care unit is. Doctors there forced to evacuate the hospital's sickest patients, some of them on ventilators.
At the top of the hour, Ian is posing a serious flash flooding risk as it slowly moves closer to Orlando. But its effects are being felt now along the West Coast. This is video here from Daytona Beach. This morning, we have an NBC team covering it all over Florida, standing by to give us live updates on the impact of Ian.
While the disaster unfolds across Florida, we are getting a clearer look at just how hard Hurricane Ian hit Cuba. Let's bring in MSNBC anchor Jose Diaz-Balart, who is in Bradenton, Florida, for us. Jose, good morning. What more can you tell us about the conditions on the island where you are?
Philip and Francis, very good morning to you. Well, what's going on in Cuba is an unmitigated disaster. And as we remember that Ian actually slammed into Cuba, the largest island in the Caribbean, as a Cat 3 hurricane, focusing primarily on Pinar del Rio. This is a province, agricultural. It is the center of Cuban cigars, and it was devastated. As a matter of fact, as of today, and this according to the Cuban government, I want to remind you that the Cuban government is the only source of information in that country. So according to the Cuban government, 2 deaths to report, but the devastation is just widespread. And just the effects of this, and just think of an island that is going through a Cat 3 hurricane, and yet we saw groups of Cubans take to the seas on rafts and on boats to try and get out of that island. As a matter of fact, one boat carrying more than 25 Cubans capsized just off Stock Island here in the Florida Keys yesterday. Let's remember that that's when the storm was already barreling towards Florida. That boat capsized. 20 key people are still missing as of this morning. 4 were able to swim to safety, to government Coast Guard officials who were there on the scene. 3 people were rescued. They are in area hospitals. But as I say, that's the level of desperation that is going on in Cuba. As a matter of fact, we spoke to a woman from Pinar del Rio, Ana Julia Gomez, who kind of talks a little bit about what she and so many others experienced with Hurricane Ian.
Esto fue desastroso, lo nunca visto fue esto, este ciclón.
¿Perdiste todo?
Todo. Me quedé sin nada, usted lo puede ver.
She says, I am left without anything. I have never seen anything like that. That's the reality that's going on in Cuba right here. And as you've been showing, Philip and Francis, the storm is now heading as a Cat 1 towards the Orlando area. Let's check in with Michelle Grossman, who has the very latest on this hurricane's path. And Michelle, just extraordinarily slow, the movement of this hurricane right now.
Yeah, hi there, Jose. Yeah, we talked about that yesterday. It is slow. Luckily, as we talked about yesterday, it didn't make it to that 3 to 4 walking pace, but it's still at 8, 9, and that's really slow. So it's crawling across the state of Florida, and that's why we're seeing that heavy rainfall. It's a big storm, too. It was strong yesterday. It made landfall at 155 miles per hour. Now we're seeing barely a Category 1 storm, but still really strong as it's so much further inland. Now let's take a look at some of the wind gusts that we saw yesterday, because so many spots saw winds gusting over 100 miles per hour. In Cape Coral, 140 miles per hour. Naples, 112. They saw a gust of 112 miles per hour. The rain was heavy. It continues to be heavy. We're going to see life-threatening flash flooding today. Some spots just getting going with this storm. So Punta Gorda, 17.29 inches, nearly 20 inches of rain. Some spots will see 24 inches of rain today. Some even up to 2.5 feet of rain. So that is a big, big story on this Thursday, and that will continue into the later part of Thursday as well. Taking a look at radar right here, we are looking at heavy bands, and they will come in and out. Where you see those darker colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, that's where we're seeing the heaviest rainfall, and that's where we're seeing that rain pile up. So here is the latest, 55 miles south-southeast of Orlando, Florida. That's going to be the bullseye for some really dangerous weather today. Also Daytona Beach, Jacksonville. Winds are at 75 miles per hour. So a Category 1 storm, the criteria is 74 miles per hour and a little bit greater than that. So movement at 9 miles per hour, as Jose and I talked about, it is very slow, and that's allowing all this rain to fall. And it will stay inland as we go throughout most of the morning of Thursday, and then it's going to pop into the Atlantic later on Thursday. Tropical alerts are in place. There's still so many of them. This tells you that this story is not over, that we are just getting started in some places. It hasn't even started in Georgia or the Carolinas, so we're going to continue to watch this tomorrow and through the weekend. Hurricane warning, this is rare. We're seeing it coast to coast. Where you see the red here, that is your hurricane warning, and those warnings stretch all the way through the Carolinas. So the heavy rain is falling. We're also seeing the winds gusting this morning, so some spots hearing those winds howl with those dark skies and not really knowing what damage was caused yesterday. So 66 mile per hour wind gusts in Daytona Beach right now, up to 35 in Orlando. And we're looking at flood threat as well, flash flood warnings right now. Back to you guys. Oh, back to Jose. I'm sorry.
You know, Michelle, just amazing. Thank you. Just amazing the amount of water that this storm brought and continues to bring to Florida, a state that is already oversaturated. We're just finishing the rainy season here in Florida. It's just unimaginable the amount of water that this storm continues to bring to this state. Jesse Kirsch is in Orlando. Hey, Jesse, the storm is heading over there as a Cat 1. I keep thinking, Jesse, about the large Puerto Rican community that is in the Orlando area through the I-4 corridor that actually moved to that area 5 years ago after Hurricane Maria slammed into Puerto Rico. And now they're waiting for another hurricane, this one, Category 1, but with a lot of water and a lot of wind.
Yeah, and Jose, you talk about the water. It's running out of places to go. That's already happening here where we are in Orlando. I want to show you what is supposed to be a pool deck. It's now just a pool. The water has been making its way up this staircase. It appears to have slightly receded in the last half hour or so, which is great news. And you can see the rain's somewhat at a trickle. We wouldn't call this a trickle on a normal day, but compared to what we've seen in these overnight hours, this is right now a trickle. You talked about the Puerto Rican community. We met a gentleman earlier who said he came to the U.S. Came to the mainland U.S. in the aftermath of Maria, and he talked about when we're talking about the potential threat of what could happen here, you could tell that he was thinking about what has happened in the past, and he said he brought his days-old baby boy, his young daughter, his wife. They all agreed, along with other family members, to go to a shelter, even though they have a third-floor home, because they didn't want to chance it, even here in Orlando, which is not supposed to have been seen the worst of this storm. But here, you talk about the wind, Jose, but it's really about the flood threat, because we're looking at the potential for 30 inches of rain in some parts of this area, and the potential for flash flooding. And you and I talk often. We have obviously been talking about flooding in other parts of this country recently, and we know from the survivors of those incidents that those floods can come before you have time to realize that you have a real serious concern in front of you. I'm talking about the back deck here seeming to recede a little bit. Unfortunately, it's too late for the front of this property, Jose. Just on the other side of our camera, on the other side of a little a bar area that's up a couple stairs, we've got water in the lobby of this property where we are bunkering down, and we are well past the point where officials wanted people on the road. So anyone in the Orlando area should be sheltering in place at this point to finish seeing through what is left of Ian coming through this area. And as you mentioned, it's heading this way. It still has not arrived. So the rain, which is somewhat calm right now, could be picking up pretty badly again in the hours ahead, Jose.
Jesse, I thank you so very much. You know, just putting a little bit more perspective on this, 11 days ago, Hurricane Fiona slammed into Puerto Rico, La Isla del Encanto, and today, 11 days after that hurricane struck the island, there is a large percentage of that island that still today does not have electricity, and running water is still a commodity in a lot of places around Ponce and other places in that island. Jesse, thank you very much. I want to go back now with Francis and Philip. As I kind of send it back to you, I can tell you, Francis and Philip, that we've been nonstop in the last 24 hours or so, covering this storm here in the Bradenton area. And for the couple of hours that we were able to go to a house here, a wooden house, right by where we have our studios here, that house was shaking. It was a wooden structured house. That house was rocking. The winds extremely powerful. Bradenton, Sarasota Airport, according to officials here, severely damaged. 80+% of Sarasota County was without power last night. We've seen since then a lot of power coming back, and you can't really see it, but I'm right behind me is the Bay of Sarasota, and behind that is the Gulf of Mexico. Sarasota's around there, and we're seeing a lot of light coming back. But still more than 2.5 million households in this state are still without power.
Yeah, that's reassuring to know that the power is coming back on, but it's also what that will reveal, right? When the power comes back on, Jose, when the sun comes up as well, that will be telling. Jose Diaz-Balart, always great to have your perspective. Thank you so much. We'll check in with you in a little bit, too.
Yeah, we are back in just a minute. We have continuing coverage on this storm. We're going to take you live to an area where tornado warnings were triggered by this hurricane.
Plan A didn't work out? Get Plan B one step. Plan B helps prevent pregnancy before it starts, and it won't impact your ability to get pregnant in the future.
And we are back live in Bradenton, which is right beside Sarasota. In Osceola County, Hurricane Ian triggered tornado warnings. I want to bring in Andrew Sullivan. He is with the Osceola Fire Rescue, Public Information Coordinator at the Osceola County Fire Rescue. Andrew, thank you for being with us this morning. What have you heard as far as tornadoes touching down? Describe what you all have been dealing with the last 24 hours.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on. Yeah, my day started actually yesterday at 5 a.m. My wake-up call was a tornado warning for a very southern part of Osceola County. So spreading that word and getting the safety information out has been almost the last 24 hours for me. Our Emergency Operations Center here has been activated at a level 1, our highest level, since yesterday morning at 7 a.m. So we've had a full day of response to this storm. We're thankful to see it start to dissipate somewhat. I think it's just hanging on to a Category 1 status right now. So thankfully, those heavy winds and damaging winds weren't as much of a factor in Osceola, but we are still going to face serious flooding as this goes on. As we're waiting for, daybreak to happen, that is the main threat to Osceola County at this point.
And so tell us a little bit about Osceola County. What kind of industry, what kind of structures? Tell me a little bit about the county.
So we're definitely a mix of agricultural. We've got a lot of tourist industry here as well. A lot of folks that are on the western portion of the county that were more affected by the heavy winds. That's where the folks that are going to the theme parks are staying. So a lot of the tornado activity that we had today, a lot of it was radar indicated, but we didn't get a lot of reports for damage because they happened on the east side. That's more agricultural, thankfully. But what we're seeing now, like I said, we're seeing heavy rains, and as things continue, even as folks wake up to see what's going on around them, the rains to the north of us, in areas north of us in Orange County, and those places will be coming down to us still for a day or two afterwards. So we won't have seen the worst of it still for some time.
Andrew Sullivan, I thank you for being with us this morning. Very much appreciate your time. Philip.
All right, Jose, we will talk to you in just a moment here. Nearly 2.5 million Floridians are right now without power. Stay with us. Next, we have Ellison Barber, who is on the ground in Tampa.
One Bounty versus 2 of the leading ordinary brand. One sheet of Bounty.
You remembered. Life. Smart. You.
Let's turn now to Tampa, where Hurricane Ian was originally forecasted to hit the city head-on. The storm's powerful winds drained massive amounts of water from Tampa Bay, causing this eerily-looking reverse storm surge. For more on this, we bring in Ellison Barber. She is on the ground there. Ellison, good morning. People have to be feeling lucky, like they dodged a bullet here.
Yeah, they really are, and that's exactly how the mayor of Tampa described it when she was speaking with our colleague Tom Yamas last night. She said that there is no doubt in her mind that this community dodged a bullet. That being said, there are still hundreds of thousands of people in this county alone, Hillsborough County, waking up in the dark without power. Over 200,000 homes and businesses are without power right now, and there is still a risk, a threat, a warning for rivers to perhaps crest over. So did the impacts of this hurricane hit Tampa in the way that maybe they thought it would 2 or 3 days ago? Absolutely not. And for that, there is a lot of relief here, because all in all, this could have been so much worse. But other communities, they have been impacted so badly that this community, while they feel like, okay, let's take a breath, they also know how many people will need help beyond here. And that's one thing the mayor talked about, that they are going to be readjusting some of their resources that they have available here, that they planned for here, anticipating a much bigger impact from Hurricane Ian, and they will be shifting that to get it to other communities as quickly as possible. One thing, the airport here has been closed since yesterday evening. They told us they expect to open tomorrow, and the National Guard will likely use Tampa International Airport as a hub of sorts to deploy resources further down the coast.
Yes,
Francis,
I'm sure
Philip.
many of those residents were really eager to come back home. Thank you so much, Ellison. And still ahead here on this special edition of Early Today, Michelle is back, keeping a close eye on Hurricane Ian's track as it barrels across Florida.
Welcome back on this Thursday. We continue to track the wrath of Ian, and we're going to continue to do this over the next several days. Still a strong storm, Category 1 storm, and as it makes its way throughout today, it's going to merge into the Atlantic tropical storm. Then it's going to make a turn towards the north and also the west, impacting portions of Georgia, South Carolina. We'll see its third landfall in South Carolina. We'll be right back.
Or visit us at mesofund.com.
As the west coast of Florida assesses the damage from Ian, the east coast braces for the worst of the torrential rain, high winds, and rough surf. Joining us now is the Deputy Mayor of Palm Bay, Florida, Kenny Johnson. Kenny, thank you for joining us this morning. You've seen what Ian can do as it has swept through the state. How prepared do you feel your city is for the brunt of this storm coming?
We've been making sure we've had, first off, sir, thank you for having me. We've made sure we've had all proper preparation in place for our city and for our residents. While we send our, our thoughts and prayers, and we'll send our support to those on the Southwest, we made sure that all of our residents took proper precautions in bunkering down and make sure they had everything in store, being that stores, schools, and everything of that nature will be closed on Thursday.
Given that, talk about your constituents, the people there who have evacuated, not knowing what the state of their homes will be when the sun comes up, when they try to return. What are you telling them?
Many of them, I'm sharing, strong support in whatever their decision is, whether they decide to bunker down or leave. You have to, at the end of the day, you have to do what you feel is best. But we also want to make sure we show strong support for our residents, whatever situation they want to go with.
How many people do you get a sense, like percentage-wise, that were able to heed that and evacuate, and how many have decided, hey, we've seen hurricanes before, I think I'm going to stick this one out?
I would say majority of our residents chose to bunker down. Specifically, many of the hurricanes we've dealt with in the past in Palm Bay have come from the east side, not so much the west side. So being that many of our residents saw that it was coming across the land from Tampa, Fort Myers area, many bunkered down, prepared their homes with shutters, generators, everything of that sort, and just, locked it in with their families.
So that is a different scenario from many of the other communities and people we've spoken to where people have evacuated and now it's a waiting game, right? In the overnight hours, they're trying to see when it's best, when they can go back home. Talk to me about the resources that you have there, that if everybody is at home and there's not a whole lot of rescues that needed to be taken place, where can you actually have those resources shared by other communities?
Yes, sir. So we do have our Palm Bay hotline, and I'll say the number real quick. It's 24-hour hotline. That number is 321-726-5683. This is in regards to, you know, Florida Power and Light.
Perfect. I appreciate that. We're glad we got the number in. We have a hard break, so I apologize for having to cut you off, but we appreciate your time, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
We thank you for watching Early Today. Along with Philip Mena, I'm Frances Rivera.
Need a backup plan? Get Plan B one step. Plan B helps prevent pregnancy before it starts by temporarily delaying.
Good to be with you at this hour. I'm Frances Rivera.
And I'm Philip Mena. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Early Today as we continue to track Ian, which has just been downgraded to a tropical storm. The storm, though, is still very dangerous as it barrels through central Florida. It made landfall as the 5th strongest storms to ever.
The strongest ever to hit the United States. This thing is now slowly crossing across the state, but in its wake, widespread flooding, trapped residents in their homes, and now millions of people do not have any power this morning.
Yeah, we are just starting to assess the damage. NBC's Sam Brock in Venice, just north of where Ian made landfall. Sam, good morning. As the sun starts to peek out, what are you seeing?
Stand by.
Sam, can you hear?
Savannah, Hoda, good morning. It is hard really to find a word in the English dictionary to describe what the situation looks like this morning after Hurricane Ian inflicted historic levels of damage. Catastrophic might be the best option right now. Let's start in Naples and Fort Myers, where the streets were turned into impromptu rivers and lakes. You could see, guys, pieces of homes floating down these rivers, cars that were swallowed up whole. In Fort Myers, there was a man we spoke with last night who was on the 20-something floor of his condominium with his 91-year-old mother surrounded by 8 feet of water. According to Governor DeSantis, you're looking at storm surge that reached 8 to 12 feet, maybe even higher in some areas. It's hard right now to just put a figure on how many homes have been damaged, but a starting point in the thousands is very likely. We do not have numbers right now on fatalities. We are expecting to get more information on that, though, from Governor DeSantis at about 8:30 Eastern time this morning. That is when he is expected to hold a press briefing. As far as power is concerned, 2.5 million customers right now in Florida have no electricity. The telecommunications right now is very challenging. I'm not really hearing you actually at this moment. There is no cell service. They're bringing in portable cell towers to try to alleviate that. If you look at some of the counties right now that were hardest hit, where Ian really carved its way right through, we're talking about like Lee and Collier counties. There's about 3/4 or more of customers there, 80 to 85%, with no power whatsoever. So you can only imagine under those kind of trying conditions what it's like for hospitals who are caring for people who are already sick or perhaps are now injured, and what those staffs are doing. We spoke with Sarasota Memorial Hospital yesterday. They were camping out there, expecting to be there for days, even weeks, however long it takes to protect those patients. Port Charlotte as well, staff members there working through the night. I will leave you with this. Flooding will be top of mind today as we are looking right now at 14 inches of rain in southern Sarasota County in 12 hours, a once-in-a-thousand-year flood that now feels a lot more common. Let me send it back to you.
Yeah, Sam, thank you setting the scene for us there.
No kidding. In Port Charlotte, they had like the roof was ripped off of a hospital, and you're watching these medics wading around up to their knees in water trying to care for people. There's so many stories out there, Bill, and a lot in the wake of this horrible storm.
Yeah, good morning. There's so many people that evacuated that are wondering, how's their house? Well, how's it still looking? I mean, that's going to be the case for maybe days until we get a good feel of just what areas were hit the hardest. And that storm surge that you saw all those pictures of, they're floating the cars and in the houses. Well, that water came in, and then last night that water went out. So a lot of that water is gone. And so when we see the pictures from the helicopters, you're going to see see, it doesn't look that bad unless it was the wind damage. You're not going to see that water damage unless the houses were, wiped away in the waves, but that may only be on the barrier islands. So let me give you the latest on the storm. It's down to a tropical storm. We still had some wind damage overnight through central Florida and additional power outages. It did go a little further to the south of Orlando area, so the power outages in that region were a little less than expected. No one's complaining about that. So we're going to exit the storm off the Space Coast during the day today. We still have that heavy rain threat. We have a flash flood emergency in areas of Seminole County. We still have a flash flood warning around Orlando and this area from Daytona Beach through Volusia County. So we still have concerns with strong winds into Daytona Beach, New Smyrna area, and that heavy rain threat. Then we'll take the storm off the coast, and all of that rain is heading northwards. We are going to see the possibility of a tropical storm or a hurricane landfall tomorrow up there in this between Savannah and Charleston, guys. So we're not completely done yet.
Hey, Bill, I have a question about that Tampa Bay. We saw the water get sucked out of Tampa Bay. It looked like almost dry on the bottom. What happened? Like, what happened to all that water?
It's the opposite of what happened where the storm surge was, because the winds on the northern side of the storm are blowing out off the coast. So it's just taking all that water and throwing it out to sea. And the opposite's happening where you have the storm surge south, the Fort Myers, the Naples, the Bonita Springs. That water is being driven in by the winds. So, yeah, it was the harbors were blown out. Those areas were fortunate that they didn't have to, the water that they got rid of, that was the water that ended up to the south.
Oh, okay.
All right, Bill, thank you. And ahead of the storm, of course, thousands had to be evacuated, including from Marco Island, that is just south of Naples. And officials say what they will return to in the next coming days is horrific damage. Mike McNeese is the city manager. He joins us live. Sir, I mean, what a difficult 24 hours you have had. First of all, just your assessment so far of the damage that you believe Marco Island may have sustained.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me. The first thing I'll say is, fortunately, we didn't have the kind of wind damage here on Marco Island that they suffered farther up the coast. The storm hit us, the highest end had already passed, so we didn't get in the hurricane force winds as much, more tropical storm force winds. So from a wind standpoint, we're in much better condition. We did have very high water, as high as anyone around here has ever seen. And we do have some flooding of homes. We haven't been really able to assess how much, and we're looking forward to the sunrise today to get out there and do that. We're going to find, I'm sure, a lot of boats that we don't know where they are. And a lot of docks have been destroyed, and certainly some homes are flooded. Overall, we fared pretty well, and we're very much interested in getting out there to find out just exactly how well, particularly relative to some of our neighbors to the north.
Yeah, Mike, a lot of people, I know there were a lot of people who rode out storms. They've probably ridden them out in Marco Island. Do you have any idea how many people are still out there? Are there rescues that you guys need to get to right as the sun's coming up?
We have done some rescues already. We did some yesterday afternoon. We had a few people that we could get to who were in compromised positions that we helped and reached out to. This morning, we're about to find out. We're going to be out in the neighborhoods, and we have some cell service, and so I'm sure we'll be hearing from some people, but we didn't have a lot of calls overnight. We didn't have a lot of issues, people reaching out and saying they were in some sort of distress. So we're a little optimistic, but we've got to get out there and really make sure.
You said a few moments ago, it's the water's as high as anybody's ever seen there or can remember. Did you get some anecdotes from people? How have you been able to make that assessment?
Well, I saw at least one picture of a boat that showed up in somebody's front yard, which is a little unusual, I would say. But, we stood outside ourselves and watched the water come up alongside of our police station where our emergency ops center is. And we hadn't seen anything like it. And it was just coming really fast, and you could actually see it rise in real time. And so it was the sort of surge that we just haven't seen here before.
It's terrifying. Mike, how long before power gets restored? Is it off, by the way, in all of Marco Island?
If it's not, I'd be surprised. I know it's off for a vast majority of the island. We will be first priority this morning, clearing roads so that the Lee County Electric folks can get out. They're not really able to yet, but that's going to be a first priority. Fortunately, the water is pretty much gone for us. We don't have, I don't think, roads blocked. although we really encourage people not to come out until we can get out and make sure that there's no lines down that are compromising or blockages. But we want to get LCEC out there as soon as possible, and that's going to be one of our first priorities this morning.
Well, we know you have hard work ahead of you. Thank you so much for spending a few moments this morning, Marco Island City Manager Mike McNeese.
You bet. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mike.
Be well. Be well. When you see some of the time-lapse footage, what he was talking about, how quickly the storm surge seemed to come up. So you'd have a street that was dry, and I've seen time-lapse footage online where it just all of a sudden comes up and it's 6 feet high.
And to hear someone like Mike, who's been in Marco Island for a long, long time, saying that as long as he's been there, nobody has ever seen it like this, and it ranks among the top 5 storms in the country. Hurricane Ian, a high category 4. Right now, some of the wrath, the worst of Ian's wrath, is behind us, but it is making its way toward the eastern side of Florida. NBC's Blaine Alexander is in Orlando. It's been downgraded to a tropical storm there, but a lot of folks hunkered down, and the city's theme parks are closed. Hey, Blaine.
Yeah, that's right, Hoda. Even a weekend Ian is certainly a powerful one here in Orlando. You know, and the biggest thing, the name of the game that everybody's watching here is flash flooding. Those are the alerts. Those are the concerns. Those are the warnings that we're hearing from officials. And of course, as you see right now, every now and then we'll get a very powerful gust of wind that knocks me off balance. We've got our producer kind of holding our materials right here. But if you look behind me, this is why. We've seen this steady rainfall that's been going since late last night, and it's going to continue at this pace until at least noon today. Here's why that's problematic, is because already we've seen over a foot of rain fall across parts of Orlando, and that's in less than 24 hours. And we're talking about falling at a very fast clip. We're talking about rainfall as much as 2 inches per hour. Now, when you talk about this foot total, that's more than double what Orlando typically sees in the entire month of September. Now, just in this morning, when we were driving from our hotel over to our live shot, we actually came across some of that flash flooding. We saw some roads that were already inundated with water, and that is only expected to get worse as we see this rain continue at this steady pace for the next 6 hours or so. Now, how do you mention those theme parks? We're talking about Disney World, Universal, of course, SeaWorld. All of them are closed down and expected to continue closed till the end of the day, guys.
All right, Blaine Alexander for us there in Orlando. Blaine, thank you.
And we're going to have a lot more on the storm in a few minutes, the damage, and also some new information on its projected path now. That's at 7 a.m. Eastern on the Today Show. For now, though, I'm Savannah Guthrie alongside Hoda Kotb, and this has been an NBC News special report.
A dental tool is round for a reason.
And outdoor allergens, day after day. Feel the clarity and make today the most wonderful time of the year with Claritin Clear.
Hurricane Ian smashed into Florida's southwest coast with colossal force Wednesday, leaving destruction in its wake. The storm has been downgraded to a tropical storm as it moves across Florida. Let's bring in Sarasota County Communications Director Jamie Carson for how the region is faring. Jamie, we appreciate your being with us. We see the command center, everybody at work behind you. We have 2 hours before the sun comes up when it's go time for your teams there. How are you all preparing now, and what's the first order of business?
Hello, Francis and Philip. So that go time has already passed. We've had our tactical first in teams out into the community starting at 2 a.m. Eastern time today. They're making sure that our emergency routes are cleared. So far, our emergency and our first responders are already responding to our 911 calls in the northern portion of our county. We also have damage assessment teams that are scheduled to go out in about the next 45 minutes to start making those assessments. You know, we're not even scheduled to have sunrise until about 7:30, but our teams are already out there assessing and trying to help our community members, Francis.
This is storm surge. This is the ocean coming into Naples. There is no delineation anymore between the Gulf of Mexico and Naples.
There's the wind speed as I'm standing next to a building, which is somewhat protecting me. So I'll take a knee. Whoops. If I can take a knee here.
We both had to take a knee out there. I mean, we did, signs are blowing over, debris flying around.
About 90% of our city is without power now.
The winds are extremely high and the water's rising.
You can see portions of trees just clinging to I don't know what that have been flying around through the streets.
It's a cinder block wall that was the entire width of this area came down.
We're on the back end now where the back eye wall is coming through. We've had some of the strongest winds here so far.
Good to be with you this morning. I'm Francis Rivera.
And I'm Philip Mena. It is 4:30 a.m. in the east, 1:30 out west. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Early Today. As we track the devastating path of Hurricane Ian, here's what we know at this hour. The strong winds of Ian already impacting Daytona Beach along the western coast as it slowly moves toward Orlando. The storm has been downgraded to a Category 1, but it's still packing a powerful punch. There are nearly 2.5 million power outages across the state.
Ian made landfall in southwest Florida in the Fort Myers area where the storm surge submerged buildings. It could take days or weeks to know the full impact, but the county manager tells NBC News overnight that they are getting a sense that the community has been decimated.
And in Port Charlotte, which is north of Fort Myers, this hospital says they were hit from above and below. This storm surge flooded the lower level emergency room, and the winds tore apart the 4th floor roof, which is where the intensive care unit is. Doctors forced to evacuate the hospital's sickest patients, some of them on ventilators. We have reporters fanned out across Florida this morning, ready to give us live updates about what is happening along the storm's path.
I want to bring in now MSNBC anchor Jose Diaz-Balart, who is in Bradenton, Florida, just south of Tampa. Jose, we hear those words like detriment and decimated, strong, powerful words that equate the storm to. But where you are, some sense of reassurance. You're saying some power has been back on, given that the trees and power lines have been down throughout the night.
Yeah, Francis, good morning. Power is slowly being reconnected in the areas. For example, right behind me is the Sarasota Bay. Behind that is the Gulf of Mexico. Sarasota area is just behind us, and some of the power is being restored there. But I've got to tell you, Bradenton, which is side by side with Sarasota, the Sarasota-Bradenton Airport, according to officials, received heavy damage. And there are large swaths of this county, Sarasota County, that are still without power. Bradenton, you have a lot of areas that are still without power. What's amazing is that yesterday, the governor of Florida said that there were 42,000 linemen ready to step in and they're put at 30 different locations in the state of Florida, waiting to immediately come into the areas that have suffered power outages as soon as possible. And it's already starting to get possible for areas like Sarasota, Bradenton, when we're seeing some strong winds, but certainly not as strong as we were seeing just an hour or so ago. I want to turn to someone who's flown into the eye of the storm. Nick Underwood, he works for the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Nick, I was struck by a video that has gone viral that you put up, and something that you wrote. He said, "When I say this was the roughest flight of my career so far, I mean it." And then another thing you said, "I have never seen so much lightning in the eye of the storm." Describe, Nick, what you saw and what you experienced.
Yes, so we flew through Hurricane Ian yesterday morning as it was intensifying up to its peak Category 4 strength. On our first pass through the eye wall, we were in there for about 10 minutes. It was the longest eye wall penetration that I've ever flown in the 6 years that I've been doing this. I've never seen so much lightning in the eye wall. And even then, once we got into the eye, we were flying through the storm at night. The sun hadn't come up yet, but I had taken photos inside the eye where it looks like it's as bright as morning, just because there was so much lightning lighting up the inside of it. It certainly was the most intense ride that I've had so far.
Forewarned weather forecast today at 5 on Local 4 News.
Hi, everybody. It's Thursday. Millions in Florida waking up to catastrophic damage from Ian.
Yeah, the full impact being revealed as the sun rises this morning. It is September 29th. This is Today. Path of destruction, massive flooding and power outages as Ian barrels across Florida, crashing ashore as one of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit the state.
All of a sudden, I felt something and then heard like a train coming right to the house.
Nearly 3 million people in the dark, the devastating storm surge leaving entire neighborhoods underwater, homes and cars floating down streets. This hospital swamped from above and below, losing part of its roof, its ground floor flooded. Crews still carrying out emergency rescues on land and at sea. We're live across the state with complete coverage and what millions need to know as the threat moves up the East Coast. Get out. The urgent security alert for all Americans in Russia to leave the country immediately. And the new warning that anyone there with dual citizenship could be drafted into the Ukraine war. We'll have the very latest. Breast cancer battle. Well wishes pouring in for Katie Couric this morning after she revealed her diagnosis.
Thank you all for your support.
Just ahead, her decision to speak out and what she wants all women to know. Those stories plus historic blast.
Throw deep to left field. This could be it. See ya.
Yankee superstar Aaron Judge crushes his record-tying 61st home run of the season, cementing his place among baseball royalty. Today, Thursday, September 29th, 2022.
From NBC News, this is Today with Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kutby, live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
Good Thursday morning. So happy you're joining us today. Good to see you.
Yeah, the sun's coming up in Florida, and we're getting a closer look now at the widespread devastation left behind by Ian.
Yeah, there are two major concerns right now there. The flooding, of course, and the power outages. Nearly 3 million people across the state woke up this morning and could not turn the lights on. No electricity.
Ian made landfall yesterday as a major Category 4, packing 150-mile-an-hour winds and causing massive storm surges across Florida's Gulf Coast.
So right now, Ian is making its way east toward the eastern side of Florida. We have a live look at some of the conditions going on. This is Orlando, and while the storm did weaken overnight, it still remains a serious threat.
Yeah, it's a rain story there. And then once Ian heads away from Florida, it is expected to then curve back toward the Georgia, South Carolina coastlines, impacting millions across the South in the coming days.
Yeah, we got it all covered for you this morning. We're going to start off with NBC's Sam Brock. He is in Venice, Florida. That's just north of where Ian made landfall. Hi, Sam. What's the assessment this morning?
Yeah, Hoda, Savannah, good morning. It is terrifying to think what we're going to see in the light of day. I was just talking to a police officer here in Venice. They resumed search and rescue operations at 2 o'clock this morning looking for critically injured people. But he said, look, I got to warn you, block to block, there's dead wire, there's live wire. As you look behind me right now, you'll see splintered signs and power lines down all through here. Now, in East Naples, guys, there were 30 rescue missions yesterday as the urgent efforts right now are underway to find those imperiled by Ian.
It's devastation that was predicted, but the grim reality of this storm's raw power defies imagination. Ian, now a tropical storm, hit the coast as a fierce hurricane, shredding homes apart in Placida, Florida, tearing off roofs and splintering trees, while in the Tampa area, extreme winds causing this tree to crash through a home. In one of the hardest hit areas, Fort Myers, there were storm surges nearly 7 feet high. Nearly double the previous record more than 20 years ago.
Oh my God.
The massive surge of water leaving entire communities completely underwater.
You want me to come out?
Roads looking more like the ocean for block after block. Ian packed catastrophic 150-mile-an-hour winds, knocking out power to more than 2 million customers.
We have seen life-threatening storm surge, as was predicted. We've also seen major flooding that's going to rank as one of the top 5 hurricanes to ever hit the Florida Peninsula.
This team of emergency responders unable to respond. A massive wall of water swamping their fire truck.
Now we have a truck issue, and the guys are pushing the truck out of the bay.
In Port Charlotte, hospital staff working through the storm to protect patients. Other first responders struggling to help those in need, unable to start rescues until after life-threatening conditions subsided. Despite repeated warnings to leave, some people did not or could not evacuate. They found themselves stranded by a 12-foot storm surge. Mark and Elizabeth live in an apartment in Venice Island, Florida, but at the last minute grabbed their air mattresses and hunkered down in this Sarasota office when her boss offered it to them.
Here you are with air mattresses in an office space. Your home is 50 or 100 miles away, but you consider yourselves lucky.
Yeah. We are. Yeah.
Is that because you're safe from the storm?
Yes, because somebody help us.
Others stayed behind in the flood zone, trying to help those who were unable to leave.
I wanted to help the people in here because they're good people here in Paradise Bay.
This morning, the destruction left behind by this massive blow from Mother Nature is just starting to come into focus.
Well, hats off to those first responders, all those helpers out there, Sam. There were some viral images in Tampa that were just shocking. It was actually Tampa Bay, and it looked dry. It looked like you could walk on it. People were taking video and pictures of it. What's the after effects there?
Yeah, so here's the deal, Hoda. You're seeing all this water being really sucked out. It's called negative storm surge. And the reason behind it, you have counterclockwise winds and hurricanes. So on the northern edge of the eye wall, the water was being pulled out of Tampa Bay into the Gulf of Mexico. The problem with this, Hoda, is the fact that it can then refill when wind directionality changes, and it can happen in a matter of minutes. So if you see this, it might be tempting to go out there on the sand and check it out. Don't do it for your own safety. Yeah. Hoda?
All right, Sam Brock for us there in Venice. Sam, thanks.
Yeah, conditions can change in a split second. The water has finally stopped rising in Fort Myers, but this morning the impact of the catastrophic flooding there is being felt across the city. And joining us now, Fort Myers Mayor Kevin Anderson. Mr. Mayor, good morning. We're glad to have you on the phone with us this morning. Have you been able to assess damage? I know it's still early there. What's your sense of how bad it was?
We haven't had a full assessment, obviously, with the sun just coming up, but it is pretty bad. I'm standing on a floating concrete dock. I'm down in the river district of downtown. The problem is the dock is in the middle of an intersection, a block, 2 blocks away from the water. This is about a piece of concrete that weighs a ton, and it was moved this far away. That shows you how powerful the waters were last night.
I know one of the things that's most concerning in a moment like this is what happened to the people who decided to stay or who were left behind. Have you guys been able to conduct rescues? Do you know how many people are still out there and in need of your help?
We would estimate several dozen people who stayed behind were in need of some assistance. Our teams have been working on that. I'm happy to report at this time I haven't been told of any loss of life in the city. Now, keep in mind, we have a metropolitan area, and there may be some outside, but inside the city, there's been no reports to my knowledge.
Fort Myers more or less took a direct hit, Mr. Mayor. What's your sense of how this compares to other storms that Fort Myers has experienced?
I came here in the mid-'70s. I was on the police department for almost 25 years. Saw a lot of storms here. This is by far the worst storm I have ever witnessed. The watching the water from my condo in the heart of downtown, watching that water rise and just flood out all the stores on the first floor, it was heartbreaking.
Boy, Mayor, for you who's been there all those years and seen so many storms come and go, to take a direct hit. So what is the plan now? Like, walk us through what will happen this morning and the days ahead.
So the first thing we need to do is make sure the roads are passable and they're safe. We do have a curfew in place for the next 48 hours until we get a handle on everything. Once we get the roads cleared, FP&L will start working on the electricity. Our teams will be out there going through the neighborhoods, trying to make sure people are safe, getting assistance to anyone who needs it. We'll start working on getting the other utilities up and functioning, getting cleaned up. We've gotten some great support pledged by the president and the governor. So I think I'm optimistic. It's going to be a long recovery, but nonetheless, we're going to recover because Floridians are very resilient.
They are indeed. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. Kevin Anderson of Fort Myers. You know it's going to be a busy day, so we thank you for your time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's turn now to Bill Cairns. He's been tracking the path of destruction, where it's heading and what it's left behind. Hey.
Yeah, good morning. So we've been showing you where all the worst has been as far as the storm surge went. That was the Fort Myers area, Bonita Springs, all the way down to Naples. Overnight, we've still had a lot of heavy rain. Our NBC affiliate in Orlando, a meteorologist was saying in Kissimmee, there's been houses with homes with 1 to 2 feet of water in them. The Little Wekiva River in Seminole County, located right about here, is 1 foot over record flood stage. So again, there's still problems and still water going into homes right now because of this situation. And look at Daytona Beach, a wind gust of 69 miles per hour. So this is down to a tropical storm, but it is not a pleasant morning in Volusia County, Flagler County, heading up there to Jacksonville. That's where the storm surge is going to be coming in during the day today. So even though it's a weakened storm, there still could be some significant problems. And then it may actually intensify a little bit on its way up tomorrow in between Savannah and Charleston here into South Carolina. We may actually get landfall at either a strong tropical storm or as a hurricane tomorrow afternoon. And of course, we're going to get heavy rain in this area. Winds could gust possibly up to 70 miles per hour. And that way, we could be dealing with some more power outages, guys, in this area too, and storm surge problems, which we'll explain more about during the show today.
All right, Bill, thank you.
Thanks,
and
Bill.
As we've come on the air, President Biden has officially declared the state of Florida a major disaster. So that opens up funding and a lot of help, hopefully, today. NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt rode out the storm overnight in Bradenton, just south of Tampa Bay. Homes there flooded. The area's airport badly damaged, too. Lester, good morning. The view from where you sit.
Well, Savannah, I went out with my trusty flashlight a little while ago surveying the immediate area around us. There appears to be no major damage here. We spoke and heard from the mayor of Sarasota a while ago. He was venturing outside his home for the first time, saw plenty of damage. He's not aware of anything catastrophic, but certainly during the night, we could hear this thing howling, ultimately dying down. Now the rain has stopped, and we're feeling relative breezes after what we saw and went through yesterday, but we're all okay.
Yeah, difficult night for a lot of people, Lester. A lot of people spent the night in shelters. I'm sure they have tons of concerns about their homes. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, we went to a shelter a few hours before the eye wall came ashore and talked to people who made that choice. They had heard the predictions. A lot of them thought it was a no-brainer, immediately went into shelters. We talked to officials there who were very concerned that while they did have a number of people, they didn't have nearly as many as they expected. And that's why there's a bit of trepidation this morning as the sun comes up here. You heard it from one of the other mayors, the sense of what they're going to find now in the light of day in some of these neighborhoods. One couple we talked to said they lived in a trailer home, very worried, obviously, about their neighborhood, the vulnerability. They decided to get out, but so many of their neighbors did not. So that will be the big focus today, trying to get to those folks who rode it out and make sure they're okay.
All right.
There was no flood at their home. Lester?
Carrie, I bumped into you a little earlier today. You began to tell me that you spent a lot of your growing up around here. So what do you make of this, man?
Lester, I actually would, when I was old enough to hold a fishing rod, I would be fishing right where we're standing on a boat heading out of here. I mean, this is devastating to see this. And, you know, there's a picture somewhere of me as a little kid on the ferry before they built the causeway and the bridge to Sanibel. And my friends on Sanibel tell me now that they think that's probably going to be how they're getting back and forth for some time to come, Lester.
Yeah, a lot of people we've seen walking around with stunned looks on their face who have their similar histories in this community. All right, Kerry Sanders, thank you. As Ian roared across Florida, it created perilous conditions in the central part of the state, forcing emergency evacuations of some of the most vulnerable. Blaine Alexander is in Orlando with that part of the story.
In Orlando, even a weakened Ian dealt a mighty blow.